Hey guys, hey. Today we're going to be talking about the rise and fall of the Ottoman Empire. This is still in our Imperialism unit, and this is content question number 5. What were the causes of the Ottoman Empire's collapse? So before we get going into that, I just need to give you a little bit of background information about the Ottoman Empire itself. So originally, the Ottoman Turks came from a region that is today known as Turkey, but back then it was called Anatolia. So it is right around in this region, so modern day Turkey. They were a group of nomads, and the reason they came to power is because in the late 13th, early 14th centuries, the Crusades were just finishing up, and the Crusaders were being defeated by a group of Seljuk Turks, and they were, inflicting a lot of bloodshed on one another. And the Ottoman Turks, the group that we're talking about, they were able to seize power and kind of become the dominant power in this area. So they started in Turkey, and what they were able to do was quickly spread, really taking a lot of the land away from the Byzantine Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire. It's the same place. So they were able to quickly spread into the Balkans. Their really crowning victory was the capture right here, the connection between Asia and Europe. That's Constantinople, which they renamed Istanbul. After they were able to conquer the Byzantine Empire, they spread east into the Middle East, conquering the Safavid Empire, Persia, and then they were able to go along the coast of North Africa, defeating the Mamluk Empire. So by the 16th and 17th century, it's really at the height of their power. This is showing a map really at the height of that power. And the most powerful ruler that they had was a nice gentleman named Suleiman I, and he is on the top right of your screen with a nice hat on. So this is Suleiman I up here. He is known as Suleiman the Great, and he's also nicknamed Suleiman the Lawgiver. So he was kind of a Renaissance man. He was good at, he was a good military leader. He was a good administrator. He was a good poet. Kind of one of those people that we all hate, just good at everything. Now, we would guess at this point that the Ottoman Empire would be poised to continue spreading and become more and more powerful. However, there were a few different problems within their empire that would gradually lead to them losing a lot of their power and actually becoming one of the least powerful empires in Europe and Asia. So this is what we need to focus on, are these root problems. They are deeply embedded within the culture of the Ottoman Empire, and it's something that they really had trouble getting rid of. Number 1, the Ottomans were really good at fighting. They were not very good administrators. So one of their first problems that they ran into was they stopped conquering, and they had to come up with a new way to make money. And this for them was really difficult. They never set up a really good base system of raising taxes, and while they were conquering, they were able to just keep on looting places as they went along, but once they stopped doing that, they weren't able to loot anymore, so they no longer could do that. So they ran into a money problem. Number 2, and this one's probably even more important than the first reason, is their empire was so big that there were a lot of different ethnic groups, and there was a lot of different religious groups. Now, as time went on, these groups, instead of becoming developing feelings that they were, one people and that they were one group all ruled by the Sultan, they continually moved further and further apart from one another, these different groups, and felt more and more isolated from one another, and it was a source of real tension within the empire. Now, the Ottoman Empire did attempt to at least address this second issue, and their system of government was set up. I'm going to explain just how it was set up, and you'll see why it was such a difficult thing to combat. So at the top, like I've said, their ruler was called the Sultan. He was an absolute ruler. He had all the power. Underneath him, though, he had a bunch of advisors, and they were called the Divan. Now, the Divan were also the military leaders, and they had their own soldiers that were completely loyal to the Sultan only. And these soldiers are called Janissaries. So these were actually young Christian boys. They were Catholics. They were taken away as young men. They were converted to Islam and then trained to be loyal only to the emperor. To the Sultan, I should say. I'm sorry, to the Sultan. So that was kind of like the administrative aspect of the government. Now, everyday people were divided up into 3 different groups, or there are actually more than 3, but we'll just talk about the 3 that were the most prominent. Now, these groups within the Ottoman Empire were called millets, and they were divided by religion. So there would be a Catholic millet, there would be a Jewish millet, and there would be a Muslim millet. Now, each group was kind of its own self-contained little island. They had their own laws, they had their own religion, obviously, they collected their own taxes as much as they could, and they were really seen as 3 separate groups within a larger empire. Now, this is great when you're trying, like, before there's modern technology, this is great to keep the groups, happy, and so they're not fighting with one another. But long term, this creates a lot of problems because these 3 different groups maintain 3 different separate identities, and as we enter, the 19th century, when nationalism starts becoming a major driving force throughout Europe, nationalism starts ripping the Ottoman Empire apart because the Catholics see themselves as one group within the empire, the Muslims see themselves as another group, the Jewish people see themselves as a third group, and none of them see themselves as Ottomans. They see themselves as, people within the Ottoman Empire. So nationalism really starts ripping the empire into pieces. Now, a third problem within the empire is that Islam is the dominant religion in the entire empire. It's the religion of the Sultan, and it's the largest millet. It's becoming more and more conservative over time. So Islam used to be like the major religion in the world, and it was very adaptable. A lot of different groups of people could identify with it, and it also incorporated a lot of ideas from different cultures into its religion, and it made it kind of like the, I don't know, it was the scientific headquarters of the world. Now, as Islam becomes more and more conservative, they start shunning other groups' ideas, and this leads to them falling further and further behind Western Europe, Christianity, and even out east in Japan and China. Now, there's one individual who's mostly responsible for this movement to a more conservative Islam, and you won't need to know his entire name, but you will need to know his last name. It's Ibn Abd ad-Wahhab, and let me spell that for you. I'll spell your last name for him right up here. W-A-H-H-A-B. Wahhab, I guess, would probably be the best pronunciation of it. And he's this guy at the bottom right. So he interprets the Quran very literally, very strictly. He's a fundamentalist, and he thinks that you should follow a very conservative version of the religion. Now, it's interesting because Al Qaeda and people like Osama bin Laden, they were devout followers of this guy Wahhab. So he's still very, very prominent even today. And Saudi Arabia practices a form of Islam that's related to this Wahhab guy. So he's even very prominent still today in the Middle East. Now, outside of the Ottoman Empire, so these were all just kind of internal problems within the empire. But now they're starting to fall behind because of these root problems. They're starting to fall behind Western Europe. They're not as powerful as they once were. But Western Europe is still becoming more and more powerful, and especially Russia is becoming starting to press along all of the Ottomans' borders. And what the Russians really want is they want access to the Mediterranean Sea. They want to be able to sail their navy out from this Black Sea over here into the Mediterranean. Now, that means that they would have to capture this little skinny section right in here called the Dardanelles, which is where the Ottoman capital is, Istanbul. Luckily for the Ottomans, the French and the British do not want Russia to have the control of the Dardanelles. So there's a war that's fought on this little chunk of land right here. I'm going to write down underneath in green what it's called. So that's called the Crimea, and they fight the Crimean War. Now, what the Ottoman Empire quickly realizes is that even Russia, which is it's not even as powerful as Britain or France, they get their butts kicked by Russia, so they realize how far behind they really are. So just like Japan, after the Ottomans realize how far behind they are, they try to undergo this system of modernization. And the name of this modernization in the Ottoman Empire is called the Tanzimat. Now, similar to Japan, like I said, they're undergoing this modernization. However, they're not as successful as Japan is. Russia forces them to give up a lot of their land in the Balkans, this region over here. So that's no longer controlled by the Ottoman Turks. They have to give that up. They become free, independent countries. They also start to lose control, or actually they've already lost control at this point, of Egypt and large portions of North Africa. So the Ottoman Empire does attempt to modernize and become more like the Western powers, but it's too little too late. And as we'll see in our next couple of chapters, during World War I, they basically get carved up, and they are no longer an empire. They collapse. And what's interesting is that during the Tanzimat, there are these group of young men who are called the Young Turks, who are inspired by the modernization attempts. And after the Ottoman Empire collapses, one of the members of the Young Turks, this guy whose name is Mustafa Kemal, let me just write that under here, Kemal, K-A-M-A-L, he's going to take the core region of the Ottoman Empire, that Anatolia region, and he's going to make it become the modern day country of Turkey. But as we'll see, like I previously said, it's really World War I that marks the end of the Ottoman Empire.